Hello. Oh, yes, wonderful. It is on. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening at the Chapel of the Cross for our My Spiritual Awakening Speaker series. This series is sponsored by our grant from the Lilly Endowment and seeks to provide students with an opportunity to reflect on the intersection of faith and vocation, bringing community leaders to our Episcopal campus ministry to reflect on their faith lives and the ways this draws them to the work they are doing in the community. Tonight, we are excited to welcome Bishop Victor Glover of Fathers on the Move, an organization that strives to support men released from incarceration, equipping them with community support, mentorship, parenting skills, and opportunities to become leaders and resources in the community. Bishop Glover is a minister in the Church of God and has been ordained for 18 of 25 years in ministry in the Raleigh-Durham area. Bishop Glover is the founder of Fathers on the Move, which has an office at the police department in Chapel Hill and partner sites across the state and country. On this All Saints' Day, when the church remembers the capital S pillars of our faith, and on the eve of All Souls' Day, when we give thanks for the lowercase saints in our lives, we are glad to welcome Bishop Glover and to listen in as Simon Palmore, a senior at UNC, converses with him about faith, life, and vocation, and to be reminded by their life and witness of our call to live as saints in the making.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Bishop Glover. It's great to see you.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Very glad to have you here. So I figured our discussion can travel down a lot of different paths. Your life, your background, the work you're doing, faith, importantly. So I figured we could start at the beginning, talking a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
Okay.
What types of experiences did you have that as you got older?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Raleigh. Raleigh, North Carolina is my hometown. And yes, I'm sorry, I'm a diehard NC State Wolfpacker. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, around about downtown area, which is called the Southeast. And I live in between two worlds. There's a housing project right downtown also, which is no longer there. They remodeled it, called Chavis Heights Community Center. And so I grew up in that area, and my childhood was something else, and I experienced a lot early on, probably around about the age of 10, 11, and 12. And so with my childhood kind of being a little difficult because my grandfather was actually involved in moonshine business, you ever see those movies or whatever. And what that did was it exposed me to alcohol. And so early on, with that presence, everybody was like, well, just take a sip, and that sip took me down a path where I began to deal with alcoholism very early on. And so it was my grandmother, who also was a ordained preacher, who was really taking me under her wings to say, you can overcome this. And so what that did was, it took me down a road that I found myself caught up not only in alcoholism, but then early on addiction started. And so from that point, it led me to a path where I really began to have to find myself, early on. And my grandfather was a great man. I loved him so much because my grandparents pretty much raised me. And my mother was in the picture, but, she was having her own battles and struggles, as a single parent mother. And I didn't know my dad. And so that was another thing that, I found that I had some anger, early on because my dad wasn't in the picture. And I was like, where is he? And then later on, as I began to grow up, I experienced something in ninth grade where I got kind of kicked out of public schools, and I went to a school called Redirection. And it was out behind the state fairgrounds. And just so happened, the PE teacher was Coach Bradshaw, who was the NC State football strengthening coach. And he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so my ninth grade year, he took me under his wings, got me lifting weights and everything. And I began to find my confidence and self-esteem about myself. And what that did was it really propelled me my ninth grade year to go back into the public school. And I actually went to, I say, the best school in Raleigh, which was Raleigh-Broughton High School. And went to Broughton High and ended up playing football and became a pretty good football player. So I began to find my groove, and still no dad. He's still not showing up in the picture. And so I walked around with a little anger, and I just took it out on the football field. So that was my way of escape, And so finally, as I began to go through high school, my senior year, I didn't have nobody really keeping me accountable. I didn't have nobody holding my hand, nobody walking this thing out with. My coaches were there, but then they weren't there. And so, and my dream and goal was to play football for NC State. And I had other cousins that played for them. And so that's the route that I was trying to go down, and it didn't happen. And so with that being said, that was like a dream that didn't manifest, but it took me to say, let me look at myself a little bit more. And so ended up, because football was still in me, I ended up playing semi-pro football for about 7 years. I was a pretty good player, and I did have some aspirations of what if I could make it to the NFL, and that didn't happen. So with that moving right along, then probably around about 22, I went to a wake with my mom. She called me, like, can you take me? And I was like, all right, I'll take you. And ended up at that wake that night, my mom walks up to me and says, somebody want to meet you. And I said, okay. And so when he walks up, she was like, do he look like anybody you know? I was like, no, he don't look like nobody I know. And then I looked again, I'm like, oh man, I hope you're not trying to tell me this is my dad. And sure enough, it was my dad. And that was 22 years old. And by that time, my life had took another twist because, making a little money and hanging around knuckleheads, it took me down another path. And just so happened was when me and him met, that night we went out and, we got to, talking and all this and stuff. And so basically he was head of narcotics for Garner Police Department. He was a lieutenant, actually. And with that being said, my life was like dibbling and dabbling in that world. And I was like, oh my God, my dad is like, okay, he's like, okay, 5-0, And so basically, maybe another year or two, so we started getting to know each other and all those things, and finally, round about age 24, I had an experience. And and you always hear from your parents, know who you riding with, know who you going out with. You hear all those things your parents tell you, and I just so happened with some guys and they had drugs in the car. And just so happened, things went down and we all got busted. Well, here I go, down this road, and that road actually was a defining moment in my life. And what happened was I ended up going to prison. Yeah, that was an experience. And that little old grandmother, she did not give up. When everybody else did, that little grandmother was still praying. That little grandmother was still walking the floor at night, calling on Jesus, like, Lord, save that boy, And so finally, it was when I had went on that trip, that road, that journey, and I never forget calling back home to my grandmother because I checked on her every morning. And finally, that one morning that I called, it was like my third day leaving society, she was like, are you tired yet? Are you tired of leaving the ones that love you? And and I was like, you know what, I am tired. I'm tired of this lifestyle, and she said, I love you so much. And I just started crying, right there in the jailhouse. And then the funniest thing happened is that, when I finally got off the phone with her, I looked, and there staring at me was a fake mirror, okay? Because you can't have real mirrors in the jailhouse. So, and I looked in that fake mirror, and for the first time in my life, I saw me in a fake mirror, okay? And that was it. That was a revelatory day. That light bulb went off. I'm like, I'm done. I can't keep doing this to myself and to the ones that love me. And I had a radical experience with Jesus right there. And I'm going to tell you what, I cried out and I told God I was tired. I told God, I can't keep living like this because I know the direction I'm going. Ain't but one or two ways this could end up. And the whole time, y'all, that little grandmother was praying. She did not give up, y'all. And like, she would come see me and visit me, rain, sleet, or snow. And finally, that third day, that evening, getting off, looking in that mirror, I started crying. I started bawling. Like, I just let everything out that I've been holding all those years. Dad, just angry, and I just finally let it out. And I'm going to tell y'all what, I threw my hands up and I said, Lord, if you be the God of this little brown Gideon Bible, they get the Gideon Bibles in jail. And I said, here I am. I'm done. This is a wrap. And I'm going to tell y'all what, if I didn't have an experience that day, and what happened, all the guys knew me. I had a little, reputation, out there. And my AKA street name was Big Cheese. Everybody used to joke about that, right? And this little dude walked up to me and said, sir, whatever you did with God, I want the same thing. And I was like, okay. Well, just throw your hands up and just ask God to come in your life, that's what I did, And bingo, it was like an epiphany, like, what just happened? And the whole dorm got quiet. Like, those guys thought I had lost my complete mind. I did, okay? And so finally, it was like 30 minutes later, the guards came in and took that little young guy out because he was a juvenile. He wasn't even supposed to be in there. They put him in the wrong floor, and God knew that he would give his life to Christ that night. And then it was like, hold on. So some things, how people speak over you growing up. You're going to be this. You're going to do this, And it hit me like, okay, Lord, what are you saying? Am I going to be a preacher or something? And lo and behold, I leave and go on to prison from the county jail. And I'm going to tell y'all what. On the 7th day of me leaving, I had went on a consecration. I started fasting. Because there's some things I need to be delivered from, right? And I started crying out. And I remember my grandmother fasting and walking the floor praying all night. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to fast too. Because I need to be delivered from some of my own issues, And on that 7th night, God's perfect number of completion, a preacher came into the camp and he was on fire. He came in preaching the God knows truth. He said, look, somebody in here tonight, God is wanting to just fill you up with his love tonight. And I was like, dude, that's me, And I jumped up and ran down there. And I'm going to tell you what, I had a radical experience that night. My life was forever changed. Oh, y'all don't hear me. And I just gave it up to him. And that night, I started my journey where I started reading that Bible day in and day out. I started diving in there and studying and show myself approved unto God, a workman need not to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. And I began to find myself. I began to find my purpose. And I began to love when I found out about me, y'all. Like, dude, this is really happening. Boy, you begin to become a preacher or something. And I'm like, I'm still trying to figure it out. And God started using me on the yard, y'all. So y'all, I was kind of radical on the street. So, I couldn't be nothing less in God, in Christ, if I wasn't radical on this side, okay? And so God just started preparing me and training me and teaching me, Simon, to the point that I began to act out scriptures. And guys were coming to me, and I was like Paul, and Barnabas and those guys where they were in prisons and things happened. And God was using me. I started Bible studies, in the dorms. I was on the yard preaching, like radically preaching Jesus' word, And I even took some baby oil because, we can't get no anointing oil, right? So I took some baby oil and consecrated it and was laying hands on guys like, and with baby oil, Well, the scripture say he'll take the foolish things to confound the wise, And so, Simon, my life, I begin to see it. Moving right along, I'm in this journey about 2 years. I know what I'm becoming. And I remember the day walking across the yard and one of the guys yelled out and said, "Hey, Pastor." I said, hold on, is he calling me? And I turned around, he was like, yeah, Pastor, I need you. And I just stopped in my track. I said, oh my God. I knew it then. I said, you calling me to be a pastor? Really? And then he backed it up with scriptures. You know, Jesus asked Peter, who do men say that I am? Because men will tell you who you are to them. And I knew then that was a defining day that I would become a pastor. And that journey just began to move, and I was preaching. All those good things happened. And so the chaplain, we really got tight. And so finally, I'll never forget, I got a call down to the office, and just moving real quick. And they called me down, and they said, well, your grandfather just passed away. And I was like, oh, man. I was trying to get home. I could believe if I could just lay hands on him, he would be made well, you know, made whole. And I was like, okay, man, and he heard me becoming a preacher. He was so proud of me. And in the same evening, they called me back and said, well, your parole was denied. So in the same day, I lost my grandfather, and they denied me parole. And I was like, okay, Lord. And I had such an attitude with God then to say, well, my work must not be done yet. And it wasn't, because they ended up shipping me to Durham, and I went up there. I didn't know why, but until I got there, the inmates, the guys on the camp, didn't have no type of Bible study or going. So God was taking me up there to start the church. Oh, y'all don't hear me. And like, dude, he was like teaching me, like, and I went up there and started the church. Church got on fire. And I never forget the warden walking up to me one day and said, hey, look, the outside church can't make it. Now, this is totally against DOC policy, okay? He said, look, the outside church minister can't make it tonight. Will you come preach the word? I said, for real? He was like, yeah, we want you. I was like, yes, sir, let's do this. And for real. And, you know, and I teach our guys, our parish, our members, sometimes you only get one shot at a thing. Sometimes you only get one shot at a soul. And I remember the message, what type of man are you? And I gave like several different illustrations of a man. And men gave their hearts to Christ that night. Even some guards got saved, Lord. That was like totally like insane. Like, did y'all just see that? I knew then. And so I called home. You know, I called my grandmother. I called her my baby. I checked on her. She said, boy, what you doing up in that prison? I said, what you mean, Grandma? She said, I don't know, something happening. What you doing? I said, I'm just preaching the word of God, walking it out. She said, the parole people called here. I said, really? Why? She said something about you coming home. I said, hold on, you gotta be kidding me. So they just turned me down for parole, and guess what happened, y'all? They brought me back up, right? I said, Lord, the devil done kicked me out of prison. Y'all don't hear me talking. and sure enough, y'all, and this never really happens, and they brought me back up for parole and granted it. And lo and behold, I went home, and I'm gonna tell y'all what, I was on fire. 2 months after being released, I mean, I was, like I said, y'all, I was so into my scriptures. I went right into the ministry. I'm already walking ministry out in there. I got licensed and ordained as a minister 2 months being released, y'all, okay? That's like unheard of. 3 months out, which was the next month, I called the chaplain back. I said, man, you ain't gonna believe this. I'm already an ordained minister. He's like, what? He said, look, I'm about to pull some strings. I'm bringing you back in here. Because I told these guys, and I told you, if you go out and do what you were doing in here, I'm going to bring you back in so these guys can see a real example of a man of God that kept it real. You know, as the young people say, keep it 100. You know, we kept it 100. And sure enough, I went back in, and I'll never forget that night. Those guys seen me, and I had a collar around my neck. Boy, you couldn't tell me nothing. And I walked up there, and I was fired. I was ready. And I'm going to tell y'all that night, 150 men gave their life to Christ. That was like an outpouring of the Spirit that night. And moving right along, so I began to take that journey. And so it just took me right into ministry, and here I am now, some 27 years later in ministry. And so childhood, left childhood. Okay.
Well, that was that was incredible, and just hearing you speak a little bit about your childhood and the absence of your father until you were 22, and the different paths you were going down during your childhood and young adulthood. From what I know about your organization, Fathers on the Move, I see a lot of connection there to your own personal background. So I was hoping you could tell these folks about Fathers on the Move, what it is, what it does.
Okay.
I think that would help.
Good. Yeah. It's my baby. Like, you know, that thing that you wake up every day and you're passionate about, that thing that you eat, sleep, and bleed, that's Fathers on the Move for me, right? Because I know what it is to be fatherless. I know what it is not having a positive male role model in your life. And so I knew, you know, especially even our context and culture, you know, that's a big problem. And so I was on a mission to do something about that, you know? And so God had blessed me with probably with the best jobs I ever had in the secular world. I ended up getting a job at DSS. Hold on, y'all didn't hear that, did you? Department of Social Services, right? And Orange County, that is. And so I ended up working for them, and it was a CPS social worker that saw like the vision I had, and she came to me one day and was like, "Look, I want to sit down with you and map out. God is doing something in your life, especially for the men, because I was advocating for men's rights. I will help them in child support court, you know, and all those type of things." And so finally, we sat down and really began to put our heads together and came up with a curriculum. Because I had been doing prison ministry for 25 years, but I knew we needed something different because you see the same guys repeating offenders, coming back and coming back. And so I knew we had to go deeper. And the deeper thing was getting to the root issue of a man's issues, the root cause of his issues. And so Fathers on the Move that's what it is. It's getting a man to open up, drop the walls, crack that shell, know how to communicate, stop walking around with all that garbage, all that mess in you, and be able to let it go. That's what it is. And we created an atmosphere because most men, you know, and I like to say we are bad communicators. Men don't know how to communicate a lot of times, right? And so we got to know how to communicate. We got to know how to open up. And that was something I didn't know how to do. And so finally, when I found myself and God in my life, I knew how to begin to open up, even to the point I never forget telling my dad, "I forgive you." See, you can't walk in unforgiveness. And I looked my dad to his face and to his eyes, and I said, "Pop, I forgive you, man. You know, I don't know what happened in 1969. He went off to Vietnam, you know, and him and my mom never got back together." And so with that being said, it was only up until, let me say this to y'all, man. Thank you, Lord. 3 months ago, my dad is 70 now, and he just came clean. Do y'all hear me? He just came clean with everything. And I mean, he cried all he wanted to, and he let it out. And I was so proud of him that he finally let it out. And so I heard his side, because, you know, there's two sides to a story. And so from that point, he been watching me on Facebook, and God been dealing with him. And God just made him come clean. You know, he's like, "Man, look at my son. We had an event. It was the first time he ever attended one of my events on Zoom. And just seeing all that I do, you know. And so basically, Fathers on the Move is where our theme is preparing men and youth for purpose, okay? And now ladies too, because we've started Sisters on the Move, okay? So basically, it's where a 12-week course, and we go through certain aspects, you know, dealing with anger. We deal with communication, coping skills, all these particular things we deal with. And then we have a 3L system. And you all taught me this, okay, the young people, especially teenagers, because one of our, seems like a battle right now that we're really losing is our young black males. and you know, and everything that's going on. So I said, we gotta reach it. We gotta save our youth lives. And so I just went in and took 6 months, and guess what I did, y'all? I listened to you all. I went in and listened and took notes. Talk to me. I want to hear what you got to say. Because most young people say, well, y'all always want us to listen to you all, but who's listening to us? Amen. And so I just listened, and I began to write, and I was inspired. And then the next L, the 3 L's, was learn. I began to learn from y'all, what y'all like and dislike. So I begin to, you know, he began the process where I can get my own diagnostics of like what's going on with you, right? Through those 3 L's. And then that last L is life. We got to know how to do life with young people, you know, and be relational and be intentional about that. And so Fathers on the Move. And so basically we have that 12 weeks with a graduation because we believe we need to celebrate, especially men. Men need to be celebrated, you know, built up. And our youth as well. And then we have another 12 week, which is all leadership. Well, I want to pull the leadership out of you, right? I want you to know and understand, what is your leadership skill set? What is that thing that's in you? And so it can begin to be developed and fine-tuned and begin to push out of you, you know. And I like, you know, it's like being a good coach. And that's one of the things I got trained in is as a coach. So Fathers on the Move, basically, we go through a process where we equipping and sending. And so now our high schoolers actually are peer support to our junior high schools, our middle schoolers, okay? And now we even going into elementary, okay? And so that was another thing that just really opened up, because one of the judges called me out like in court, because, you know, I go to court with our guys. And she was like, Bishop Glover, I need you here. So I said, yes, ma'am. It was Judge Scarlett, beautiful lady. And she says, I got a young man right here. You all are his last line. If he don't get it right with you all, it's a wrap. And I said, we'll take him. And he was actually our first teenager, okay? And now he was 15, and now he's 23, and he just won the Overcomer Achiever Award this past weekend at 23 years old. And he has a great job. He's going to community college. He's turned his life around. His grandmother actually was there also. We just celebrated our first conference this past weekend too. So we just had our first national conference, which was a dream come true. We had guys flew in from all over the country, even overseas. New thing. Hello. We also now have our international division of Fathers on the Move, which was displayed this past weekend, where one of our leaders who graduated also this weekend, our newest location internationally, Nassau, the Bahamas. Yes! And so our international division now is Nassau, the Bahamas, Ghana, West Africa. So I'll be going to Ghana probably around in January, and Pakistan. Now that's totally radical, Pakistan. And Pakistan was introduced to me by a pastor who was actually watching what we were doing, and he just reached out to me. And so I ended up training him and looking right over into Pakistan and seeing everything that's going on. And one of the biggest cultural things was the men were whipping their wives with switches. And he felt that Fathers on the Move could help those men over there understand what real fatherhood was all about. And so now we have graduated our first class in Pakistan, and those guys, those men are now loving their wives and treating them with respect, you know, and it's just a beautiful thing that's happening. And so that's what Fathers on the Move is all about. We're a mentoring agency here, and we're spreading. We had our guys coming from Pittsburgh, PA, California. We're no longer a program, we're a movement. And guess where it all happened? Right here in Orange County. And so I'm just honored and humble to see where Fathers on the Move is going now. And now Youth on the Move, okay? And so that was another first that we introduced at our 3-day event. Friday was our fishing rodeo. So we took the kids on a fishing rodeo this past Friday at Lake McIntosh in Burlington. And so one of the things was I am trying to start a now national movement with alternative schools. Because y'all remember my 9th grade year, right? And that's where I believe we can have more impact from disrupting the whole school to prison pipeline. I want to eradicate that thing, right? And so that's what we are now. And we're going into the alternative schools. And I want to show the kids something different. I want to show them, get them out of their neighborhoods, their communities, and expose this great big world to them. You know, prior to COVID, we would do college tours, and so we would actually show them HBCUs and PWIs, and so they could have a choice and see both worlds. And now with things opening back up, we hope to kick our college tours back in effect. And so that's kind of another thing that we do, is take the kids out and see this great big place that we live in the United States, and see the campuses, and so that they can see. And we help our students, our kids, that by their junior year, we try to have a plan for them to know which direction they're going, whether it's college, whether it's military, whether it's Job Corps or trade school. So we try to have them to identify those things. We try to have them ready for scholarships, and so that they can be in the first round of the pot. You know, y'all know how that works. And so that's kind of what we do. Fathers on the Move. Yeah.
It's an amazing, amazing organization. And it's, I mean, just since I've known you for about a year now, and just seeing how it's even expanded in the last year is incredible to watch. And so, you know, as I hear you talk about the organization and kind of how you got into it, I'm hearing a lot about this idea of finding your path. And you mentioned a part of this program for young folks, you know, whether it's job, military, trade school, college, whatever it might be. And a really important aspect of our program here for students at this church is helping us learn different ways that we can try to discern our own paths forward. I'm a senior, I'm graduating in May, we have other seniors here, but you know, even looking a few years down the line, it can be a stressful time.
Absolutely.
And so since you have done so much work helping younger folks pick their path, and also picking your path yourself, I was wondering if you could share some advice for people at that stage of life that are in this room and beyond.
Yeah. That's good. So 2 things we do right out the gate, especially in Fathers on the Move, and it's creeped over into the ministry also. First thing is that we set goals. Like, what is your goals? Okay? And write it down. So we give out actually notebooks to everybody and a pen. Okay? And we say, now we're going to hold you accountable to stay close with your pen and your notebook, because I believe if you put energy and time into yourself, you're going to be more apt to learn more about yourself. Okay? Even when we go into the prisons, because we are pre and post release inside the prison camps. And so, especially for men, you know, so that they can invest in themselves. So with writing your goals down, it's important, because I remember 1996 through 98, I wrote my goals down. I said, this is what I want to do. And so the next thing, we write down our issues. Like, so I can just say this, like, for every person, especially young people, whatever your issues are, deal with them. Let me say that again. Whatever your issues are, deal with them, because if you don't, they will deal with you, and they will grow up with you. Okay? We have grown men, 50 years old, they're still walking around mad, angry, and bitter because their dad left them at 10. Okay? And so you got to confront that. You got to face your own demons and look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I got to work on me, and be intentional about that. So I say this, you know, don't deviate from your goals. I didn't deviate. It's 27 years now. I have not deviated. I stayed the course. I was intentional. I like to call it like a bulldog with a bone, right? and I'm not letting the bone go, right? And so that's the thing. And so I have an attitude of movement. I want to move forward because I know what going back look like. So I would say this: be intentional about your own movement. Remember, fathers on the move. We must move men. So in the process, keep moving, because there's a passage that goes like this. It says, though I press towards the mark for the prize of the high calling in Christ Jesus. So what does that mean? You know, the more you press, the more you're going to hit that mark. Like it's when you take a bow and arrow and you try to do what? Hit the what? The bullseye, right? So you're going to hit the mark if you keep pressing, right? Now, remember, y'all, I told y'all in my high school days, I wanted to go to NC State. Well, I didn't go to NC State, but guess what happened this past June? Y'all see these colors, right? I'm representing my alma mater. Okay, and I'm so humble and grateful. My wife went all out. This is my class ring right here. I graduated Liberty University this past June. Okay, so I didn't deviate from my plan. You know what I'm saying? And I stayed intentional. And yes, it may take some loops and turns, and it may take some hits that may knock you down, but you got to get back up. Okay. And that was my thing. As a football player, we were always taught hit and roll. So if you hit the ground, you got to hit and roll. That means you roll, get back up. Okay? And so that's in my mentality, right? And I stayed the course. Even through ministry, I stayed the course. As a pastor, I became a church planner, okay, because I have a vision. And that vision I knew was bigger than just Raleigh. It was bigger than just Chapel Hill or Orange County. And so next I got ordained as a bishop. And bishop is an overseer. It's an office, okay, to oversee, raise up, equip. I call it the 3 Ds: discover, develop, and deploy. We must discover, we must be developed, and we must know what it is to be deployed, okay, in that area of what God is calling for you to do. And so I think I remember telling Simon that through this whole path, right, sometimes you're not going to see it. You might go into a field, sometimes you might even, what your degree may be in, and then it may take a little twist or turn there. But guess what? You keep striving, because you're going to get there. You stay focused. You're going to get there. And so I could have never imagined that at our triennial world conference, we have our world conference every 3 years, where all our ministries and missions from overseas come to our world headquarters. And this past, I think it was August, guess who got promoted? Little old me. And guess what I got promoted to, y'all? This is crazy, like totally crazy. I'm on the mobilization. I'm on the national commission. I'm already on our national commission, where I help oversee churches all over the country. Regionally, I'm on our evangelistic commission and multiplication commission. But just recently, I got promoted to the very first, too. I am the first African American director in the history of the Churches of God General Conference. And they've been around since 1826. And not only did I become the co-director, they gave me a whole region, y'all. I'm like, Jesus, help me. And so now I'm over the southeast region of the Churches of God, and that spans from Florida all the way to Louisiana. And so that path, I could have never imagined. I know my grandmother's shouting in heaven, that's my grandbaby, y'all, look at him. But I followed that path, your destiny, your purpose. Stay committed, stay focused, keep your grind on. Even when you get discouraged, even when it looks crazy, even when you can't even see what's going to be next, you got to know what it is to walk by faith and not by sight. Okay?
Wow, that's amazing. Your promotion, I had no idea. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, man.
Wow. Well, so I wanted, as we approach the end of our time, I wanted to see if anybody in the audience had any questions for you or anything else. And if not, I've got one last question. But y'all, now's the time. I can't really see all of you, so.
I don't have a question, but I didn't even know this was happening tonight. Yeah, you said what I said in my ear.
Look at that.
I was blown away.
He said he,
It's just, I didn't know this was going on. I had no idea this was happening.
so glad you made it. He said he didn't know this was happening tonight, but
Your story's great, man. Thank you.
Absolutely.
he said you said what he needed to hear, so.
It's good. And guess what? You can be trained as a mentor. So we're looking for recruitment. Okay? Yes.
Wow. Anything else? Well, we will close with that. And just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us tonight. Your words were incredibly powerful. And if we could thank Bishop Glover for...
Can I please take a picture with you all?
Oh, we'll do a picture.
I'm behind you, but I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Chapel of the Cross, and we're so thankful for the Lilly Endowment that provides the funds for this evening. And it does include an opportunity for students to have dinner and conversation not only with you, Bishop Glover, but also with some of the parishioners who have joined us. And so if there are parishioners that are able to stay for dinner, there are tables set up with some chairs sort of leaning towards, those are set aside for parishioners to be then mixed in with our students, and also for you to join us for a meal and some continuing conversation. I think your story and stories are inspiring, and it's wonderful to know that in your life you've experienced and shared with us some of how Jesus can feed the 5,000, right, with just some loaves and fishes, and we think that what we have to offer is so meager, and God can just expand that and feed so many. So thank you for telling us some of your story and inviting us into what we could potentially do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. We'll do the picture. Yes, great. We'll do that. Why don't we gather right here? So we got the little steps. Thank you so much. Would one of the parishioners help with the